the summer of 1941, and the world is burning. In just 11 days, Adolf Hitler's armies had torn through the Soviet border and swallowed more than 600 miles of territory. 3 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, an air force that had already obliterated the Soviet military on the ground before most pilots even had time to reach their planes. Stalin called it the most catastrophic military collapse in modern history. He wasn't wrong. By October, the Germans were within 20 miles of Moscow. Civilians were fleeing. Factories were being dismantled and shipped east, brick by brick, just to keep them out of Nazi hands. The Soviet Union was losing the war. And in a small apartment in Moscow, a 29-year-old woman named Marina Raskova sat down and wrote a letter to Joseph Stalin. She didn't ask for safety. She didn't ask to be evacuated. She asked to be allowed to fight. Marina Raskova was already a legend. In 1938, she set a world record for long-distance aviation, crash landing in the Siberian wilderness and surviving for 10 days with nothing but a pistol and a jar of chocolate. She understood something that the military men did not. There were thousands of Soviet women who knew how to fly. And right now, the Soviet Union needed every pilot it could get. Stalin said yes. Within weeks, Raskova had recruited over 400 women. School teachers, factory workers, university students. Some were barely 18. None had ever been near a battlefield. They were given second-hand uniforms sized for men, boots so large they had to stuff them with rags just to walk, equipment that didn't fit, a headquarters that told them plainly that they were expected to fail. But the 588th Night Bomber Aviation Regiment would go on to fly over 30,000 combat missions, more than any other unit in the entire war. They did it in the Polikarpov Po-2, a training aircraft built of plywood and canvas. No radio, no radar, no parachutes. The German fighters flew at 350 miles per hour. The Po-2 maxed out at 94, and yet somehow, impossibly, these women became one of the most feared forces on the entire Eastern Front. Every mission began the same way. Just after midnight, when darkness was absolute and the stars were the only light for miles, the women would take off in groups of 3. 2 planes acted as bait. They would fly directly toward the German target at full speed, their engines snarling. The German searchlights would find them instantly, flooding the darkness with white beams. And then the 3rd plane, the one carrying the bombs, would cut its engine entirely. Silence. In the sudden quiet, the only sound was the soft whisper of wind through canvas wings. The searchlights couldn't find it. The guns heard nothing. The plane became invisible. The pilot would glide silently over the target, release the bombs, pull up hard, restart the engine in the dive, and disappear back into the dark. But this is not just a story about bravery in the air, it is a story about what these women endured on the ground. They flew in shifts, through the entire night, every night. A single pilot might fly 8 missions before sunrise. On the most intense nights, some flew 16 or 17 sorties before dawn. In temperatures that dropped below -40 degrees Celsius, in open cockpits, without gloves thick enough to keep their hands from going numb. Frostbite was common, permanent damage was expected. The women learned to keep their hands inside their jackets between missions and then bare them at the last possible moment before takeoff. They slept in barns, in ditches, in whatever shelter was closest to the runway. They ate when there was food. They flew when there wasn't. Natalia Meklin flew 980 combat missions. She was 19 years old when she flew her first one. Irina Sebrova flew 1,008, the highest count of any pilot in the regiment. Polina Gelman, who was Jewish, flew 860 missions. She knew what capture would mean for her specifically. She flew anyway. They were not officially recognized as combat pilots at all. The Soviet military classified them as support personnel to avoid granting them bonuses and honors. When they were finally recognized, male commanders fought the recommendation. Marina Raskova, their founder, never saw it happen. She was killed in January 1943. She was 30 years old. There is one mission that haunts the history of the 588th more than any other. The summer of 1943. The women were veterans now. On the night of August 1st, a group of night witches flew toward a heavily defended German position near the Taman Peninsula. The searchlights found them faster than usual. The anti-aircraft fire was dense. 2 planes were hit. Dusia Nosal was killed instantly by a direct hit. Her navigator Irina Kashevarova, wounded and alone, kept the burning aircraft in the air long enough to complete the bombing run. Then she turned the burning plane back towards Soviet lines. She crash-landed in a field just inside friendly territory. She survived. The mission was completed. Nosal was posthumously awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal. She was 24. That story was never taught in most Western history books. She died completing a bombing mission in a plywood plane, and the world mostly forgot her name before the century was out. That is what we are here to correct. By 1945, the Night Witches had flown over 30,000 sorties. They had dropped over 23,000 tons of bombs. They had been awarded 23 Hero of the Soviet Union medals. And when the war ended and the Soviet Union held its great victory parade through Red Square, the 588th Night Bomber Aviation Regiment was not invited to march. The reason given was that their planes were too slow to participate in the flypast. So the women who had flown 30,000 missions in darkness stood on the sidewalk and watched the parade pass without them. The Cold War buried them. For decades their story was controlled, incomplete, untold. In the West, it simply didn't exist. Irina Sebrova, the woman who flew 1,008 combat missions, died in 2004. She was 83 years old. She never became a household name. She never had a film made about her. And yet she flew more combat missions than almost any pilot in the history of warfare. History is not just what happened. History is what we choose to tell. The Night Witches didn't disappear because their story wasn't extraordinary. It disappeared because the people who control stories decided it wasn't important enough. They were wrong. Every name in this story, Marina Raskova, Natalia Meklin, Polina Gelman, Irina Sebrova, Dusia Nosal, deserves to be spoken aloud, to be written down, to be passed forward. Because this is what courage actually looks like. Not the courage of men with ranks and resources and propaganda machines behind them. The courage of a woman who cut her engine at 1,000 feet in pitch darkness, with no parachute, gliding silently over an army that wanted her dead, holding her breath until the moment she let the bombs fall. And then did it again, and again, and again. The 588th Night Bomber Aviation Regiment flew from 1942 to 1945. 30,000 sorties, 23,000 tons of bombs, 23 Hero of the Soviet